What if the quiet janitor mopping the lobby wasn't just a janitor? What if the billionaire CEO challenging him to a friendly spar had no idea she was about to be humbled? Not by brute force, but by something far deeper. This is not a story about fighting. It's a story about character. And what happens when the strongest person in the room is the one who walks away. If stories like this move you, ones about redemption, grace, and the quiet power of goodness, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. It helps us bring you more true-feeling stories that stay in your heart long after the video ends. Now, let's begin. At 8:47 a.m., the central atrium of Valencia Innovations pulsed with anticipation. The sun poured through the glass ceiling, casting long beams across polished marble floors. Dozens of employees lined the perimeter of the training mats, some holding company-issued notepads, others balancing lattes and curiosity. The air buzzed, not from the buzz of tech chatter, but from the presence of their CEO. Lauren Kingsley stood barefoot at the center of the mat, sleek black BJJ black belt tied with disciplined precision. Her posture, straight as a blade, exuded the kind of confidence that came from years of championships and boardrooms. She paced calmly, like a lion surveying its cage, not nervous, but commanding. "Before we talk about quarterly goals," she announced with a wry grin, "let's talk about something more important: control." Laughter echoed gently. She had a reputation for being sharp, on the mat and in meetings. "Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't just about fighting," she said. "It's about reading people, pressure, timing, balance. Leadership is no different." She turned slightly, eyes scanning the crowd. Then, as if struck by a spontaneous idea, or perhaps something calculated, she pointed at the man wiping sweat from a corner of the mat. "Hey, janitor, want a spar? Just for fun." The room fell somewhere between amusement and disbelief. A few chuckled. One manager whispered, "She's just trying to make a point." But the janitor didn't smile. He didn't wave it off. He stopped. The mop handle stayed suspended mid-stroke. His name tag, slightly faded, read, Harlan, mid-40s, quiet. Kept to himself. Most employees didn't know his last name. Some didn't even know he had one. He looked up. The room stilled. Harlan Briggs wasn't a tall man, nor was he broad. His gray polo shirt hung loose over his lean frame. His work boots squeaked slightly on the mat's edge. But there was something in the way he stood. Not confrontational, not proud, just steady. He looked around, then at Lauren, and stepped onto the mat. A sharp inhale rippled through the crowd. Lauren tilted her head, amused. "Really?" He nodded once. "You said, just for fun." The murmur in the room thickened. A few chuckles. A few phones lifted subtly to record. One intern whispered, "This is going to be embarrassing." And another replied, "Yeah, but for who?" Lauren stretched her shoulders and approached. She didn't underestimate him, not entirely. But neither did she expect anything extraordinary. She'd sparred with Olympic wrestlers and world-class black belts. This was a janitor, a man who mopped her floors. And yet, there was something about the calm in his eyes that pricked at her pride. They faced each other, hands raised lightly. No referee, no rules spoken. She extended her hand. He clasped it. Contact. It was subtle, but immediate, the kind of awareness only someone who had trained long enough would feel. The quiet stability in the other's grip, the fluid adjustment of stance. Lauren narrowed her eyes. She went first. A gentle shoulder push, testing balance. Harlan didn't move. She shifted her weight, sweeping a foot in a light arc, meant to unsettle, not attack. He slid back, minimal movement, just enough to neutralize her. Lauren smiled, tighter this time. She circled. Harlan didn't chase, didn't flinch, just watched. She feinted a hip toss. He read it. She snapped forward, reaching for a grip. And then, without warning, her weight was off. Her hips rotated slightly, just enough to misalign her base. It wasn't a takedown. It was a redirect. And it happened without force, without violence. She stumbled, lightly, onto the mat. The room didn't laugh. They didn't clap. They just stared. Lauren lay still for a breath longer than necessary. Not from pain, from confusion, from disbelief. She sat up, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. Her eyes met Harlan's. He didn't smirk. He didn't gloat. He simply offered his hand to help her up. She ignored it and rose on her own. "Where'd you learn that?" she asked, breathless but composed. "Marine Corps," he said, stepping back to the mat's edge. "A long time ago." She blinked. That explained the control, but not the calm, not the poise, not the humility. "I didn't catch your last name." "Harlan Briggs." The name tickled something in the back of her mind, distant, forgotten. But before she could pull the thread, Harlan stepped off the mat and picked up his mop. His grip returned to janitorial form, his shoulders slightly hunched again, deliberately inconspicuous. The room remained quiet. Some were unsure whether to applaud. Others glanced at Lauren, gauging her reaction. She turned to the crowd, smiled. "Well," she said, clapping her hands once, "let's call that a warm-up." But the energy had shifted. Everyone felt it. And deep inside Lauren, though she'd never admit it, not yet, something she thought long buried stirred like dust under fluorescent lights. 6 months before the day he stepped onto that mat, Harlan Briggs walked through the service entrance of Valencia Innovations with a toolbox in one hand and a paper bag, lunch in the other. It was barely 6:30 a.m. The sky hadn't yet made up its mind between night and morning. The world was quiet, just the way he liked it. He had taken the janitorial job because it paid enough, came with benefits, and kept him invisible. Every weekday, he'd wake up before dawn, boil water for instant coffee, and slip a cold turkey sandwich into a brown paper bag. By 7 a.m., he was dropping off his daughter, Emily, at the edge of Willow Creek Elementary. She'd hug him with a tired smile, her backpack nearly half her size, and say, "Be safe, Daddy." That one sentence was always enough to carry him through the rest of the day. Harlan kept to the corners of the building, the boiler rooms, utility closets, and side hallways with cameras that no one reviewed. He wasn't hiding. He was choosing silence. People noticed him just enough to remember they'd seen someone in blue coveralls. Sometimes they handed him coffee-stained forms or broken whiteboards. Sometimes they didn't even look up. And that was fine, because Harlan Briggs wasn't here to be seen. He was here to disappear. 12 years ago, he wore a very different uniform. Sergeant First Class, U.S. Marine Corps, instructor in close quarters combat. He had trained some of the most elite units in the country. His record was spotless, until Fort Armitage. It had started like every other Tuesday drill: warm-ups, partner drills, stress scenarios. Then came the simulation. Harlan had been paired with Lieutenant Darren Cole, a bright, fast, aggressive young man. The objective was a routine takedown exercise, but Cole came in too hot, anger pulsing through every strike. Harlan adjusted, deflected, controlled, until instinct took over. One miscalculation, a counter-joint lock, a spine twisted half an inch too far. The sound, that awful sound, still echoed in his mind at night. Cole never walked again. The investigation cleared Harlan of wrongdoing. They called it a training accident. But he didn't need a ruling to know the truth. His discipline failed. His mind, once trained to protect, had let something darker seep in. Something reactive, unchecked, dangerous. He resigned before they could assign him desk duty, packed what little he had, sold his medals for rent money, and swore off violence forever. From that day on, Harlan wore the same uniform every day. No stripes, no ribbons, just utility blue and a name tag stitched over the heart. He hadn't stepped into a gym since. And then there was Valencia Innovations. To most, it was a Silicon Valley marvel. Clean glass, brilliant minds, ping-pong tables next to million-dollar strategy meetings. To Harlan, it was a sanctuary with paychecks on time and bathrooms that always needed scrubbing. Until Lauren Kingsley appeared. It was a Thursday when he first saw her up close. Not on posters, not in headlines. Right there in the corporate gym, leading a seminar for interns. He had come in early to mop the edge of the room before anyone arrived, but the class started sooner than expected, and he was caught halfway through his routine. Lauren stood barefoot on the mat, lecturing on the importance of ground control. Her GI was pristine, her belt a deep black that radiated experience and something sharper. Pride. One of the interns, Sarah maybe, made a minor error in foot placement during a transition drill. Nothing catastrophic, nothing a coach couldn't guide. But Lauren didn't guide. She humiliated. "No, that's not just wrong," Lauren snapped. "That's dangerous. If this were a real match, you'd be unconscious by now. Do it again. And this time, try using your brain." The room fell silent. The girl's face flushed red, but she nodded obediently and reset her stance. Harlan gripped his mop handle tighter. He took one step forward. Just one. But stopped. What was he going to do? Challenge a billionaire in her own dojo? Call her out in front of her employees? He stared at the slick floor under his boots. The reflection of fluorescent light shimmered across the polished tile. He had been here before, in rooms where power flowed one way and protest only made noise. So he turned his back and returned to scrubbing. Not because he agreed, but because he had learned that not every moment deserved his fire. Later that day, he saw the intern sitting alone in the break room, eyes fixed on her shoes. He wanted to say something, anything. But instead, he placed a fresh bottle of water on the table beside her, then walked away. Kindness didn't need a name. It just needed to be done. Still, something about Lauren stuck in his mind. Not her beauty, not her status, but the intensity, the way she moved like she had something to prove to ghosts no one else could see. He recognized that, because he lived with the same ones. And yet, for 6 months, he avoided the central atrium, never once set foot on the mat, until she pointed at him, until she said those 4 words. "Want a spar? Just for fun." That morning, when his boots touched the mat and her eyes met his, he felt the weight of 12 years shift, not disappear, but move slightly. Just enough to breathe. Lauren Kingsley didn't just walk into rooms, she claimed them. Whether it was the Valencia Innovations boardroom, a tech conference stage, or a BJJ mat, her presence was magnetic, commanding, and coldly precise. To the world, she was Silicon Valley's golden girl, a billionaire before 30, a dual-degree graduate from Stanford, a former BJJ prodigy who once tapped out a national champion at 15. Magazine covers called her the future in a suit. Investors described her as flawless, but none of those titles ever warmed her. Lauren moved through life with the practiced poise of someone who had long abandoned the hope of being seen for who she was beneath the armor. She didn't cry, didn't laugh too loud, didn't make small talk. She won, and she made sure everyone knew it. By 9 a.m. every morning, she had reviewed performance metrics, corrected 4 internal memos, and outpaced 3 division heads in project ideation. She trained in the company gym 3 times a week, not because she had to, but because control, physical and intellectual, was her lifeline. Control was how she survived, because for all the accolades and achievements, Lauren Kingsley had never once heard her father say the words she had chased since childhood. "I'm proud of you." He was a colonel in the U.S. Air Force, discipline incarnate. His medals outshone his words. Her childhood memories weren't of bedtime stories, but of being told to sit straighter, speak clearer, and stop crying when she fell. The only time he ever watched her compete in jiu-jitsu, he left before the medal ceremony. Said he had a flight briefing. She had won gold. Lauren used to cry in secret after every tournament. Then one day, around 12, she stopped crying altogether. From then on, every trophy became a silent rebellion. See me now? But it never worked. So she became sharper, louder, better. She built Valencia Innovations to be the kind of empire he would respect. Structured, disciplined, efficient. The company ran on algorithms and ambition, much like Lauren herself. And yet, even in her world of steel and screens, old wounds bled through. That morning, the executive leadership meeting was in full swing when one of the department heads, Martin Quinn, cleared his throat and spoke carefully, as if the very air needed permission. "I wanted to bring up facilities operations," he began, "specifically janitorial staffing. We're currently allocating over $180,000 annually across 2 shifts. With the AI vacuum fleet we've recently installed, we could, technically, eliminate 1 shift entirely." He hesitated. It would mean 1 less body on payroll, 1 janitor. That alone saves over 70 grand. Lauren didn't even glance up from her tablet. "If someone can be replaced by a robot," she said smoothly, "maybe they should." Silence, then a few quiet nods. No one dared challenge her. After all, she was Lauren Kingsley, queen of logic, defender of efficiency. But something in Martin's eyes flickered. Lauren didn't notice, or maybe she didn't care. She'd long trained herself to avoid detours of sentiment. Efficiency first. Always. Still, the janitor came to her mind later that evening. Not by name, she didn't know it. But the one with the quiet gait, the man who always pushed the mop like it was a part of him. He wasn't unpleasant, just invisible. Reliable in the way elevators and automatic lights were. Background. She recalled passing him once in the lobby. He had looked at her and nodded, not deferentially, not with awe, just acknowledgement. The kind that people give each other in parking lots and church steps. That had stuck with her, and she hated that it had. Lauren had built her life on being unshakable. Every emotion had a shelf, every weakness had a strategy. And Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu? That was her compass. It taught her how to breathe when cornered, how to convert chaos into leverage, how to win from underneath. She wore her black belt like a second spine, not just a symbol of mastery, but proof she could control what others couldn't. That's why she was merciless in the gym. It wasn't about hurting her interns or proving dominance. It was about order. Mistakes weren't just technical. They were threats to structure, to respect, to the delicate calculus of discipline. Lauren couldn't afford disorder, because under her titanium exterior lived a 12-year-old girl, standing in a backyard tournament ring, clutching her first medal, scanning the crowd for a father who had already driven away. That pain never left. It just learned how to roll, breathe, and submit. So when she challenged the janitor in front of everyone, "Hey janitor, want to spar? Just for fun." She hadn't meant it as cruel. She hadn't meant it as anything. It was a joke, really, a throwaway line. But when he turned and stepped forward, when the mop was laid down, and those dark, ocean-worn eyes locked with hers, something shifted. Not in him, in her. There was no fear in his gaze, no irritation either. Just gravity, the kind of stillness she had only seen in black belts, with nothing left to prove. And for the first time in a very long time, Lauren didn't know who had the advantage. She felt a pulse behind her ribs. It wasn't attraction. Not yet. It was the unfamiliar jolt of being seen by someone who didn't need to. As they faced each other, palms raised, posture ready, the room held its breath. Lauren smiled, her trademark blend of charm and challenge. But the smile didn't quite reach her eyes, because something in her whispered, "You might finally lose." And she wasn't sure if that scared her or thrilled her. The room was dead silent. Lauren Kingsley, Billionaire CEO, black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, stood in the center of the mat with her sleeves rolled high and her chin lifted just so. She offered the janitor, Harlan, someone finally remembered, an open stance. Her palms floated forward, fingers relaxed, shoulders loose. Her eyes sparkled with the confidence of 1,000 untouchable wins. Across from her, Harlan Briggs moved like stone warmed by time. He didn't posture, didn't bounce on his heels. He simply stepped forward into frame, calm, quiet, deliberate. One hand raised in greeting, one foot planted firmly behind. "Ready?" Lauren asked, her voice low but clear. He gave a single nod. They tapped hands. It began. Lauren struck first. Nothing aggressive, just a light arm drag to test his balance. Her fingers brushed his forearm. He pivoted back with ease. She advanced again. This time, a foot sweep feint, followed by a fake grip break. Harlan didn't flinch. He didn't even react like someone defending. He guided. As her motion committed, Harlan rotated gently, his torso shifting like a tree bowing with wind. His right hand barely touched her elbow. His hip angled sideways. Then, in a blink, Lauren lost her footing. The world tilted. Her shoulder hit the mat with a quiet thump. It wasn't violent. It wasn't harsh. It was almost elegant. A sweep. Not from power, from precision. Lauren lay there, blinking up at the white ceiling, her braid fanned across the mat like a question mark. The hum of fluorescent lights buzzed above her head, but beneath it, the air had thickened with disbelief. No one laughed. No one dared. Because what had just happened wasn't a fluke, it was mastery. Lauren rose to her feet slowly. Her expression was unreadable, at first. Then, for a single beat, a flicker crossed her face, the smallest pause, the faintest stutter in her gaze. Not anger, not confusion, vulnerability. She dusted off her elbow, and then she looked at him. "Where did you train?" she asked, her voice softer now, clipped with curiosity more than pride. Harlan didn't gloat. He didn't smirk. He didn't even meet her eyes for long. "I used to teach," he said, folding his arms. "Long time ago." Lauren nodded once, a slow, mechanical motion, as if her mind was still running diagnostics on what just occurred. On the sideline, someone whispered, "Did she let him?" Another replied, "She doesn't do that." In the back of the room, near the edge of the crowd, a young intern named Sarah tapped the side of her glasses. A subtle motion. Record on. Not out of malice. Out of awe. She captured the moment. The takedown. The silence. The stillness in Lauren's eyes when she hit the mat. She didn't know why exactly, but something told her this wasn't just a one-off event. It meant something. Maybe not now, but soon. Across the room, Harlan stepped back, as if retreating from the spotlight he never asked for. He picked up his mop quietly, adjusted the angle, and prepared to return to his corner. But he stopped, because Lauren hadn't dismissed him yet. "You still train?" she asked, brushing sweat from her forehead. "No," he replied. "Not anymore." She stared at him, studying the lines around his mouth, the calm in his voice, the weight behind it. Something in her, something unspoken, wanted to push further. But she didn't. Not now. "Thank you," she said finally. Harlan nodded, eyes steady. "You're welcome." And with that, he walked off the mat, quiet as he came. The crowd slowly scattered. Murmurs spread like ripples on a still lake. No one could explain it. Not really. Not the mechanics of the sweep. Not the presence Harlan had exuded. And certainly not the rare crack in Lauren's normally unshakable control. Back at her office, Lauren sat in her high-backed leather chair, staring at the floor for longer than usual. Her team sent her 3 reports. She didn't open them. Her coffee went cold. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't reviewing quarterly earnings or KPI charts in her head. She was remembering the sweep, not the fall, the grace of it, how it didn't feel humiliating. It felt correct, like a reset. In the intern's break room, Sarah rewatched the clip on her phone, over and over. She didn't post it. Not yet. She wasn't sure why she filmed it in the first place, just a feeling. But deep down, she knew. This video wasn't about a janitor beating a CEO. It wasn't about a fight. It was about a shift, a crack in something too perfect. And sometimes, that's where the light gets in. Back in the lobby, the mat had been rolled up. The murmurs died down. The office buzz resumed. But beneath it all, beneath the buzz and brightness, something had changed. Lauren Kingsley had been swept. And she couldn't stop thinking about the man who did it, with no force, no bragging, no triumph. Just silence. Like he'd done it before. Like he'd once lived inside the storm and learned to walk out. Lauren Kingsley hadn't felt that way in a long, long time. Restless, suspicious, exposed. After the sparring match, she returned to her office not as a victor or even a participant, but as a question waiting for an answer. She stared at her reflection in the dark screen of her laptop. The same face the media adored, the investors trusted, and employees feared. But today, it had been cracked. And the crack had a name. Harlan Briggs. She typed it into the Valencia Innovations internal database. Nothing came up beyond the basic employee profile. Maintenance, hired 6 months ago, single father, emergency contact listed as Emily Briggs, daughter. No college history, no certifications, no medical records filed. Clean. Too clean. She opened another tab, typed into Google, Harlan Briggs Martial Arts. No relevant results. Harlan Briggs Military. Still, no match. Then, from across the hall, a soft knock. "Hey, sorry." Sarah poked her head in timidly. I know it's probably nothing, but I found something weird about Harlan." Lauren's head snapped up. Sarah hesitated. "Should I go?" Lauren shook her head. "Come in. Close the door." Sarah slid in and handed over a printout. A newspaper clipping. Faded. Low resolution. Likely pulled from some archived military site with expired formatting. The headline read, "Marine Combat Instructor Injured in Live Simulation. Fellow Trainee Paralyzed." Date, 12 years ago. Location, Quantico, Virginia. Name, Staff Sergeant Harlan J. Briggs. Lauren stared at it. There was a photo, grainy, grayscale, almost too blurry to recognize. But the jawline, the eyes, the posture, it was him. The article described a simulated hand-to-hand combat drill that had gone wrong. A student lost balance, another slipped. But the sequence that followed left one soldier, a corporal named Jason Pike, paralyzed from the waist down. Jason Pike. Lauren felt her throat close. She hadn't heard that name aloud in over a decade. But it was a name etched in the back of her mind like a tattoo under glass. Jason had been her best friend. Not in the "we were close in college" kind of way, but the real kind. The kind who sat beside her when she cried after her father missed her black belt exam. The kind who passed her notes in class that just read, "You don't have to be perfect today." Jason was the one who introduced her to Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, the reason she fell in love with it. And now, the man responsible for breaking him was mopping her floors. Lauren stood abruptly. Her chair rolled back with a screech. Sarah flinched. "Thank you," Lauren said curtly, her voice cool. "I'll handle this." Sarah nodded, retreating without another word. Lauren stared down at the printout again. Something twisted in her chest. Guilt? Rage? Grief? She couldn't name it. Didn't want to. But it burned. She remembered sitting by Jason's hospital bed when he first woke up post-surgery. He didn't cry. He didn't curse. He just stared out the window and whispered, "I'm not mad at him, Lauren. Accidents happen. But I think he'll carry this longer than I will." She hadn't understood what he meant back then. She did now. Still, understanding didn't erase the bile rising in her throat. That same man had stood across from her on the mat just hours ago. He had thrown her, controlled her, with a grace that couldn't be taught in 6 months. He hadn't forgotten how to fight. He had chosen not to. Why? Why mop floors? Why hide? Why here? Lauren pressed the intercom. "Get me HR," she said. "Now." But as her finger hovered over the button to hang up, she paused. She could fire him. No reason needed. Position redundancy. Reputation risk. It wouldn't be questioned. But what would that prove? That she was still in control? That she could undo whatever strange humility he'd quietly handed her on that mat? She exhaled sharply. This wasn't about a mop. It was about the mirror she'd accidentally stepped into, and didn't like what she saw. Still, justice had its place, and so did closure. If Harlan Briggs thought he could walk through her company unseen, after what he did to Jason, he was wrong. She wouldn't fire him. No, she'd do better than that. She'd reclaim the mat, make him face her again. But this time, not for fun. This time, she'd win. She picked up the phone again, not to HR, but to facilities. "Schedule a company event," she said. "This Friday, evening, all staff, and make sure Briggs is there." "Yes, ma'am. What's the occasion?" She stared out the window, her jaw clenched. "To promote physical wellness," she said coldly, "and demonstration of leadership." As she hung up, Lauren's eyes drifted back to the clipping. Jason Pike's smile still haunted her. And somewhere in the company halls below, the man who took it away was wiping windows. But not for long. The invitation came 2 days later, pinned to the internal employee portal and printed on glossy cardstock, placed in every break room and elevator. Team Building Friday. When ego replaces discipline, mandatory attendance, casual attire, company mat provided. It was classic Lauren Kingsley. No explanation, no context. Just enough cryptic flair to make employees whisper in hallways and forward screenshots to group chats titled Valencia Vultures and Kingsley's Court. But Lauren had a plan, a clean one, surgical. She had spent the past night combing through the security footage of the impromptu spar. She trimmed the awkward silence before the match, cut the part where she'd stumbled, muted the audio where her breath caught as she hit the mat. She slowed down the moment Harlan hesitated, right before sweeping her, highlighted how he hadn't followed through, how he'd held back. That was the part that stung the most. She'd never lost before, not on her own floor, not in front of her employees. But losing wasn't even the worst part. It was the mercy. The look in Harlan's eyes that said, "I'm not here to win. I'm just tired of being invisible." So she weaponized the footage. The edited video, set to a soft ambient track, became the centerpiece of her lesson. Lauren stood before the company in the newly refurbished Valencia auditorium that Friday evening. Lights dimmed, stage dramatic, posture immaculate. "In this company," she began, "we talk a lot about leadership, about power. But power without control is chaos. And ego without discipline is dangerous. She let those words hang in the air before pressing play. The video rolled. On screen, Harlan appeared reserved, cautious. Lauren, confident. Then, a fast-forwarded tangle of limbs. The keyframes focused on her regaining control, her standing tall, his shoulders slightly slouched. The audience clapped. Hesitantly, she smiled, stepping off stage. But deep inside, something cracked. Because she knew the truth. That wasn't how it really happened. Backstage, Sarah watched from the tech booth, lips tight, fists clenched. She had promised herself she wouldn't get involved. She was a first-year intern, barely trusted with printer codes, let alone moral reckonings. But what she'd witnessed that day wasn't just a spar. It was something real, raw, unscripted. So she did the only thing she could. She uploaded the real video. It started on the internal chat thread, Valencia, honestly, just a quiet link. He cleaned floors, then cleaned her ego. The title was cheeky, but the video wasn't. It opened exactly as it had that morning. The janitor mopping the marble near the reception. Lauren, dressed in her tailored martial arts jai, gesturing with a confident smirk. "Hey janitor, want a spar? Just for fun." Laughter, then tension, then silence. Then Harlan stepped onto the mat. The real footage showed every angle, every detail, no edits, no music, just breath and contact. It showed how Lauren struck first, how Harlan didn't retaliate, just redirected. Used her energy, never aggressive, always patient. How, after the final sweep, he paused, his knee gently pressing into her shoulder, his hand hovering, and then pulling away. He let her go, on purpose. The video captured the stunned faces of onlookers, the way the room shifted, and finally, the close-up of Harlan offering a hand to help her up, his expression unreadable, but kind. No flair, no dominance, just control. By Monday, it had 1.2 million views. Not on YouTube, not on TikTok, on LinkedIn. The comments flooded in. Never underestimate humility, or a janitor. She challenged him. He held back. That is real strength. This man should be teaching leadership, not cleaning floors. He's a vet. Show some respect. Lauren sat at her desk as the alerts pinged in from every direction. Her PR team called twice. HR forwarded emails demanding answers. Veterans organizations were tagging the company, asking if it was true their CEO had publicly humiliated a former Marine. She scrolled through the comments, each one a chisel striking the statue she'd spent years carving of herself. Then came the email from Jason Pike. Subject: "Saw the clip. Looks like you met your match. Hope you're okay." Harlan's still teaching, I see, in his own way. J. Lauren couldn't breathe. The man who had once told her, "I'm not mad at him," had just reminded her. He still meant it. She clicked on Harlan's file again. Still bare. Still ordinary. But she saw it differently now. Ordinary people didn't walk away from glory, or let their opponent save face, or carry 12 years of guilt and still show up at 6 a.m. to scrub fluorescent tiles. She closed the laptop and stood up. Downstairs, Harlan was wiping a table in the break room when the noise started. First a whisper, then a rising wave of voices. He turned to see employees nodding as he passed. Some shook his hand. Others clapped him on the back. One guy, a junior engineer, saluted. Harlan didn't know what was going on until he saw Sarah. She looked guilty, but proud. "I uploaded the full clip," she said, not bothering to dance around it. They needed to see it. Harlan stared at her for a long second, then nodded once. "Thank you." She smiled. "They're calling you the humble hammer." He groaned. "That's terrible." She laughed. "Could have been worse." One guy suggested Mop Fu Master. That evening, Lauren stood behind a two-way mirror in the HR training suite, watching Harlan run a mop along the same spot he'd cleaned a dozen times before. There was no ceremony to him, no ego, just rhythm and stillness. She didn't step out. Not yet. But she knew what she had to do next. And for the first time in weeks, her jaw unclenched. She finally saw it clearly. This wasn't about discipline, or ego, or image. This was about truth. And Harlan Briggs had shown it, without ever saying a word. Lauren Kingsley wasn't someone who broke easily. She had weathered boardroom betrayals, sleepless product launches, and tech reporters who loved to see powerful women stumble. But that evening, after all the headlines, all the internal outrage, and all the praise lavished on the man who mopped her floors, she drove home in complete silence. No music, no calls, just her own breath and the relentless echo of a moment that refused to let go. She parked in her usual spot outside the glass-walled house she'd built from scratch. Sleek, award-winning, perfectly curated. The place looked like a showroom, not a home. She realized she hadn't invited anyone over in months. Inside, she poured herself a glass of mineral water, but didn't drink it. Her feet led her not to the couch or the home gym, but to the hallway closet she rarely opened. Behind a row of old ski gear and untouched awards lay a wooden storage box, mahogany, hand-carved, and heavy with dust. She hadn't touched it since her mother's funeral, 12 years earlier. It creaked as she opened it. Inside lay a stack of things she'd buried along with parts of herself. A folded tournament bracket from her first national BJJ competition, a slightly torn blue belt, and an old photo frame. The photograph stopped her breath cold. 3 teenagers on a sun-drenched training mat, herself in a faded GI too big for her. Jason Pike, with a crooked grin and his arm around her shoulder. And her father, stone-faced, arms crossed, standing behind them like a referee waiting to call a foul. She was smiling in the picture. Big, unapologetic, before medals started to matter, before performance reviews, before she believed that kindness was weakness. A memory stirred, a voice unmistakably sharp. Winning is what matters. Don't ever come second. Her father's voice. She remembered that day. She'd won her final match. Barely. But instead of hugging her, her father had only nodded, as if she'd just met the minimum requirement. That night, she cried in her room, not from exhaustion, but from emptiness. And she told herself, maybe if I win enough, he'll say he's proud someday. But he never did. The tears that came now were different. Not hot with anger, not bitter with pride, but quiet, sober, long overdue. She curled up in the front seat of her parked car, legs tucked under her like a child, and wept. Not because she had lost, but because for the first time in 2 decades, she realized she hadn't won anything that truly mattered. She had replicated him, his cold ambition, his obsession with being above reproach. And in doing so, she'd silenced parts of herself that once cared about people more than podiums. Her own company feared her. Her employees respected her competence, but no one saw her, except one man, who had every reason to hate her. And he didn't. She replayed the uncut video again, paused it at the moment of the final sweep, zoomed in, not on the movement, but on his face. That look. It wasn't triumph, it was restraint. He had her in a position he could have exploited. He could have forced her to submit, held her in a lock, let the crowd jeer. Instead, he pulled away, gave her space, left her dignity intact. And his eyes, there was sorrow in them. Not for her, but from something much deeper. A grief he wore like a second skin. Not loud, but permanent. He had been holding something longer than she had. Not pride, but pain. And somehow, despite that, he hadn't become cruel. She had. The next morning, Lauren arrived at Valencia Innovations earlier than her assistant, earlier than security. She wore no makeup. Her hair was pulled into a simple ponytail, not her usual executive braid, and she carried no phone. She went straight to the janitor's supply closet. It was empty. She waited. 15 minutes later, Harlan entered, backpack slung over one shoulder, thermos in hand, same beat-up boots. He paused when he saw her. Lauren stood, not saying anything at first. Then, in a voice quieter than he'd ever heard from her, she asked, "Do you have a minute?" He blinked. For what? To talk. No cameras, no audience, no mats. He studied her, not as a CEO, not as a woman, but as a person. Finally, he nodded. They walked in silence to the rooftop. The city below was still waking up. The sun hadn't cleared the skyline. She turned to him. "I watched the whole thing. The real version. I saw your face. You could have embarrassed me, and you didn't." Harlan didn't answer. Lauren continued. 12 years ago, I had a friend, Jason. He used to train with someone named Harlan Briggs. He finally looked at her. She nodded. "Yeah, that's how I knew. Not from your file, from that sweep. I'd seen it before, on a dusty mat, 2 kids trying to out-grapple the world." A small smile tugged at his lips. He's still rolling. He's teaching now. Sent me an email after the clip went viral. Said you're still teaching too, in your own way. They stood there, the wind brushing past like an old friend. "I thought I was better than everyone," Lauren admitted, "because I could win, because I didn't need anyone." He said nothing. She added, "Turns out I've been losing for a long time, just never saw the scoreboard." Harlan tilted his head. "And now?" She met his gaze. "Now I want to learn again, from someone who remembers why we fight in the first place." For the first time, his expression softened, not with pity, but something closer to respect, maybe even forgiveness. Lauren exhaled slowly. She didn't know where this path led, but for the first time in years, it wasn't paved with control or conquest, just truth. The hallway was quiet that morning. Long stretches of polished marble reflected soft light from the ceiling. Clean, almost sterile in its perfection. The kind of silence only existed before the building came to life with the clatter of heels, the murmurs of coffee-fueled chatter, and the digital pings of overscheduled meetings. But someone was already there. Harlan Briggs knelt beside a cart, quietly buffing out a streak of dried shoe polish with the kind of patience that seemed ancient in a world running on deadlines. His motions were steady, circular, focused, as if the rhythm of cleaning held something sacred for him, like a form of meditation no one else understood. He didn't look up when he heard the footsteps. He didn't need to. He recognized the sound of those shoes, Italian leather, muted and deliberate, with just enough heel to command respect, but not attention. Lauren Kingsley. She didn't speak at first, just stood there, 5 feet away, her arms at her sides. Not crossed, not posed, just uncertain. "I didn't know it was you," she said finally. Harlan slowed his movement, then stopped. He set the cloth back on the cart, stood up and looked at her. "You didn't need to," he said simply. "I was just the janitor." There was no edge in his tone, no bitterness, just fact. Lauren exhaled, as if that one sentence had pulled something out of her, something she hadn't wanted to see. "I don't think I've really looked at you," she admitted, her voice quieter now. "Not properly. I thought I saw everyone." "You see what you want to," Harlan replied. "Most people do." The hallway swallowed the silence again. She shifted, searching his face, not for recognition, but for understanding. Something to hold on to. "I wasn't trying to humiliate you," she said. "No," Harlan nodded. "You were trying to win. That's different." His words weren't cruel. If anything, they felt like he was explaining her to herself, calmly, even kindly. She let the truth settle. You stayed so calm, she said after a moment. When everyone was watching, when I came at you. He shrugged slightly. Because fighting doesn't fix everything. She tilted her head. But you fought back. No, he said. I responded. Lauren frowned. What's the difference? Harlan leaned against the cart, not defensive, just grounded. Fighting is about ego, about proving something. Responding, he paused, that's about protecting something, or someone, or just keeping peace. It's not the same. Lauren looked down, her fingers brushing lightly over her wrist, where he'd countered her throw. She hadn't noticed the bruise until that moment. It wasn't painful, but it reminded her that she'd been caught, not just physically, but emotionally. She took a breath. I wanted to punish you, she said, her voice low. After I found out who you were. What happened with Jason? Harlan's face didn't flinch. His eyes held hers, steady, unwavering. I figured, he said. I didn't even ask for your side, she whispered. Didn't wonder what you carried all these years. Just assumed I knew the story. You knew the headline, he replied. Not the whole page. She nodded slowly. A pause hung between them. Not tense, just weighty. Honest. Lauren finally asked, so how do you do it? Walk in here every day. Invisible. He offered a faint smile. You'd be surprised what you can see when no one's looking at you. She almost smiled too, but it didn't reach her eyes. You could have embarrassed me, she said. On the mat, in front of everyone. I know. But you didn't. I know. She met his gaze. Why? Harlan's eyes softened just slightly. Because forgiveness, he said, teaches louder than revenge ever could. Something in her chest cracked, just a little. Not pain, just a soft shift, like ice finally melting at the edge of spring. She didn't reply right away, just stood there, head lowered, her perfectly tailored blazer somehow feeling too heavy, too formal for the moment. And then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. Not as the CEO, not as the undefeated fighter, but as a woman who had, for the first time in years, run out of armor. She said nothing else. And she didn't walk away with her chin high, shoulders back, like she always did. This time, Lauren Kingsley walked away slowly, head bowed, like someone no longer certain they had to win to be seen. And Harlan watched her go. He didn't smile, didn't sigh. He just picked up the cloth, knelt down, and began to clean the next streak on the marble, slow, steady, and silent. Because some things, like redemption, aren't loud. They're lived. The envelope was small, child-sized, if there was such a thing. Light purple, slightly smudged at the corners. It had been slipped under Lauren Kingsley's office door early that morning, resting silently on the marble like a peace offering. Her assistant hadn't seen who left it. No name, no markings, just her name in rounded, wobbly handwriting across the front. To Ms. Lauren, from Emily. Lauren stared at it for a long time before she opened it. Inside, a single sheet of lined paper. A faint scent of crayons and old paper glue clung to it, innocent, unfiltered. She unfolded it slowly. Dear Ms. Lauren, hi, my name is Emily. I'm 8 and I'm in 3rd grade. I hope it's okay to write you. Daddy said maybe it wasn't polite, but I wanted to anyway. I saw the video, the one where you and Daddy were doing the rolling thing on the mat. He said it's called sparring. That's a funny word. Daddy doesn't smile much. Not really. Not since I was little. I used to think it was my fault, but now I know it's not. I think he just has heavy things in his heart. But when he came home that day, he smiled. Not big, but it was real. I saw it in his eyes. He made pancakes for dinner. We don't usually do that unless it's my birthday. Then he tucked me in and told me a story from when he was a Marine. That almost never happens. Usually he just says, "Good night, Bug." But that night he stayed and talked. He even laughed. A little. So I just wanted to say, thank you. I think something got a little lighter for him. Maybe for you too. I hope so. Oh, and also, don't be sad about the video. Daddy says losing isn't always losing if you learn something. He says you were really strong. I think so too. From Emily Briggs. P.S. I like your hair. Lauren sat at her desk in silence. She read the letter 3 times. By the second, her eyes were burning. By the third, a single tear traced the edge of her cheek, catching at the corner of her lip before she brushed it away. Emily. The quiet little girl Harlan had walked in with a few times. She hadn't even realized he was a father. She hadn't realized a lot of things. Lauren folded the letter carefully and placed it inside her top drawer, next to the rare personal keepsakes she'd kept. An old gold pen from her grandfather, a ribbon from her first BJJ tournament. Then she stood. For the first time in years, Lauren canceled her weekly executive sparring session. Instead, she drafted a company-wide invitation with a new subject line: a different kind of strength, workshop this Friday. No boasting, no hierarchy, no mats and matches, just something different. Friday arrived quietly, without spectacle. Lauren stood alone in the center of the training space, wearing a simple BJJ, not tailored, not flashy. Her hair was tied back, her voice unamplified. Employees filed in, expecting a demo, perhaps another show of dominance. But the room was bare. No sparring mats laid out, just folded chairs in a circle and a whiteboard with one phrase written across it. Mindful combat, learning the fight you don't always see. Then, from the side entrance, Harlan walked in. No mop, no cart, just Harlan Briggs in a plain black t-shirt, loose cotton pants, and an old canvas belt wrapped around his waist. Not to signify rank, but habit. He said nothing at first. Then Lauren turned to him and said simply, "Will you teach us?" He looked at her, at the quiet in the room, at the people who once laughed, then nodded once. His voice, when he spoke, was low and measured. We think strength is about who hits harder, who finishes first, who walks away clean. But in the real world, on the floor, in the field, at home, strength looks different. He paused, then scanned the faces before him. It's the father who doesn't yell when he's tired, the veteran who shakes hands instead of raising fists, the CEO who learns to listen. That's mindful combat. Lauren didn't speak. She stood beside him, arms folded, not defensively, but in solidarity. The room was still. Harlan stepped forward. He didn't throw a punch. He didn't show a move. He simply said, "A quiet war doesn't need a winner, just someone who chooses not to fight." Someone coughed in the back. Another shifted uncomfortably. And then, slowly, the tone of the room changed. People started to ask questions, real ones. How do you control anger? What do you do when someone's unfair? Have you ever been afraid of being seen as weak? Lauren took notes. Harlan answered what he could, paused when he needed to. And through it all, he never once raised his voice. After the session ended, the employees clapped, not out of obligation, but with a reverence that surprised even themselves. Lauren lingered as they filed out. She walked over to Harlan, who was putting the chairs back in place. She placed her hand on one of them to stop him, met his eyes. "I still don't know how to fix everything," she said. "You don't have to," he replied. "Just don't stop trying." She hesitated, then smiled. Not the press smile, not the CEO smile, the human one. "I got a letter from your daughter," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "She said," "You smiled." He chuckled once, barely audible. "She notices everything." "So do I," Lauren said. She picked up the last chair and placed it in the stack beside his. Not as a gesture, but as a beginning. The late afternoon light slanted through the wide, paneled windows of the training room, painting long golden strips across the floor. Dust floated in the quiet, undisturbed air, shimmering like suspended breath. There was no crowd today, no fanfare, just a gentle hum of curiosity. Harlan stood at the center, barefoot, one hand tucked behind his back as he demonstrated a basic posture. Feet flat, knees soft, shoulders relaxed, not slouched. His voice was calm, steady, not commanding, but inviting. A voice that didn't fill the room, just guided it. Around him, a dozen employees followed along, some awkwardly mimicking the stance, others simply watching with quiet fascination. No one wanted to be first to mess up, but Harlan had a way of making mistakes feel safe. Lauren stood in the back, not as a CEO today, no sharp suit, no commanding presence, just Lauren, hair tied back in a loose ponytail, black jai, no belt. She moved slowly, not out of uncertainty but respect. This space, this moment, it wasn't hers to dominate. It was something else entirely. Emily sat in the front row, legs crisscrossed, hands in her lap. Her shoes were neatly placed by the door, her little face lit with admiration. Every time her dad moved, her eyes sparkled. She didn't blink, like watching a magic trick only she could understand. Harlan demonstrated a simple transition. Step forward, shift weight, redirect force. He turned to the group. This is called Osoto Gari, not because it's fancy, but because it works. You don't have to overpower someone, just guide them off balance. He picked up a padded dummy to demonstrate. Lauren took a step forward. Can I try? There was a flicker in the room. The air stilled. Harlan paused, then nodded. Sure. He handed her the dummy. She adjusted her stance, then executed the move. Efficient, clean, almost too perfect. Too stiff, Harlan said gently. Try again, but this time, breathe before you move. She blinked, surprised, then smiled slightly and tried again. This time it flowed, not with force, but with rhythm, grace, control. The dummy fell softly to the mat. The group clapped. Lauren turned to them, sheepish, but pleased. And in the corner of her eye, she saw Emily give a tiny fist pump of approval. The class continued in that quiet way, measured steps, soft corrections, the occasional chuckle. No ego, no performance, just learning, just being. When the session ended, people slowly began to file out, some shaking Harlan's hand, others giving Lauren polite nods, many pausing to thank both of them. But Emily stayed seated. She was doodling something in her notebook, tongue between her teeth in concentration. Harlan knelt beside her. Time to pack up, bug. Almost done, she said, not looking up. I'm drawing you doing the leg swoop thing. He chuckled. Make sure you don't give me more hair than I actually have. Emily grinned, eyes still on the paper. Lauren walked over. She stood beside Harlan, watching the drawing form. Stick figures, but recognizable. One figure had a ponytail, the other had a square jaw and an exaggerated mop in his hand. You two make a good team, she said softly. She's the boss, Harlan replied, rising to his feet. There was a silence, comfortable, easy. Then Lauren glanced out the window, toward the mountains in the distance. The horizon glowed peach and coral against the fading sun. Emily asked if we'd ever go hiking, she said quietly. The three of us. Harlan turned to look at her. He didn't answer right away. But then, he smiled. Not wide, just enough. I'll bring the sandwiches, Lauren chuckled under her breath. There were no promises, no long, lingering stares, no swelling music in the background, just the low hum of the exit sign, the soft thud of feet padding across mats, and the quiet acknowledgement that something had shifted. They didn't need to say what. They just knew. Outside, As Lauren held the door open, Emily skipped ahead, backpack bouncing. "She said peanut butter and honey," Lauren said. Harlan raised a brow. "She always says that. Until she sees tuna." They walked side by side down the hallway, their steps sinking unintentionally. For once, there was no spotlight on her. And Harlan? He wasn't just the janitor anymore. He was a teacher again. A father. A man who had stepped onto a mat not to win, but to show the world and himself that peace could look like a mop and sound like silence. Lauren looked at him one last time before they reached the doors. "There's more I want to learn," she said. "I'm not going anywhere," he replied. They didn't shake hands. They didn't hug. They just walked. Together, the sun filtered softly through the windows of the old recreation hall, bathing the room in a gentle warmth. There were no championship banners here, no gleaming trophies or polished mats. Just wooden floors, scuffed from decades of footsteps, and the scent of fresh coffee drifting from a small table in the corner. A faded sign hung above the entrance. "Beginner's Budo, a place to breathe before you move." Inside, Harlan Briggs knelt quietly on the mat, tying down the edge with slow precision. He wore a simple jai, no belt, no patches. Just the uniform of a man who had let go of needing to prove anything. A dozen chairs lined the far wall. On each seat sat a folded towel and a note card. No one was here to learn arm bars or chokeholds. Not today. Today's lesson was different. Emily's picture, drawn in crayon, still hung behind the front desk. Next to it, a black and white photo of a smiling woman in a hiking vest, her arm around Harlan's shoulder. It was the only picture of his late wife he ever displayed publicly. He looked at both before every class. The door creaked open. Lauren stepped in. No entourage, no clipboard, no power heels or designer jacket. Just jeans, sneakers, and something softer in her eyes. She stood by the doorway for a moment, hands in her pockets. Then she smiled, a little awkwardly. "Am I too early?" Harlan looked up. "You're right on time." She stepped closer, surveying the room. "This used to be the community bingo hall." "Still smells like it," Harlan said. Lauren chuckled. "I thought your flyer was a prank at first. The philosophy of martial arts for beginners who don't want to fight." "Sounds like a contradiction." He smiled gently. "That's kind of the point." Lauren looked around again, then gestured to the front. "Mind if I?" Harlan nodded toward the center mat. "You're already here. Might as well sit." She walked over and lowered herself cross-legged to the floor. The movement was ungraceful, a bit stiff, but sincere. No one was watching. No one was judging. He handed her a note card. On it, just one question. "When do you feel most safe being yourself?" She stared at it for a moment, blinking slowly. "You really start class with this?" Harlan nodded. "Everyone answers, even me." Lauren exhaled and glanced down. There was silence between them. Not awkward, just space, like the kind of silence that people earn. "I used to think power made me feel safe," Lauren said at last. "Winning, control, knowing the outcome before it happened." She looked up at him. "But I wasn't really safe, just untouchable." Harlan sat beside her, his voice low. "And now?" "I think—" She hesitated. "Now, I feel safe when I can lose something and not disappear." They sat like that for a while. The door opened again. A young man with a construction vest entered. Then a woman in her 60s with arthritis gloves. A teenager, a nurse, a single dad with his son. Single? Harlan stood, welcoming each of them not with formality, but with a nod, a name, and an invitation to sit. When the group had settled in a loose circle, he began. "Today's lesson isn't about fighting," he said. "It's about stillness, and how sometimes not reacting is harder than any punch you'll ever throw." He moved slowly as he spoke, demonstrating simple movements: how to shift weight without strain, how to lower your center of gravity without fear. Lauren followed along, quietly. At one point, her knee slipped. Harlan offered a hand. She took it. No ego, no resistance, just presence. After the session, people lingered. They shook hands, shared smiles. Some stayed to stack chairs, wipe down mats. No one rushed out. Lauren stayed, too. When the room emptied, she turned to him. "Emily said you keep a jar of sandwich crusts in the fridge." Harlan chuckled. "She tells on me a lot. She says you're the best at pretending not to care. But you care too much." He didn't respond right away, just smiled. Then he reached into his duffel bag and handed her a worn paperback. It was her old BJJ tournament rulebook. But scribbled inside on the first page was a new title: Mindful Combat for Those Who Forgot How to Fall. She touched the cover like it was something sacred. "I finally want to learn how to lose well," she whispered. "You already have," Harlan replied, "and you didn't break." She looked at him. Really looked. Not like a former CEO seeing an ex-janitor. Not like a woman with guilt seeing a man with pain. Just one person recognizing another. They stood in silence once more in that small room with its echoing floor and soft, honest light. Outside, dusk was settling, the day cooling, the world unchanged, and yet, somehow, better. As they stepped out together, the narrator's voice rises, slow and firm, like wind through pine trees. Belts fade, titles vanish, but character, the way you make people feel when you don't have to, that stays long after your story ends. We'd love to know. Where in the world are you watching from today? Leave us a comment below. It always warms our hearts to see how far these stories travel. And if this story touched you, if it reminded you of someone, or simply made you feel something good, please consider subscribing to the channel. Your support helps us keep telling stories that honor kindness, quiet strength, and second chances. Thank you for spending this time with us. We're truly grateful you're here. Until next time, take care of yourself and those who walk quietly beside you.